Pennsylvania yields back the balance of his time. The gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I do want to thank my friend from Pennsylvania. Sometimes when I hear him in committee, I think about another great Republican who served in the House of Representatives from Pennsylvania, Thaddeus Stevens. But today, you let me down a little bit because Thaddeus Stevens was a great enemy of insurrection and rebellion. And he led the forces in this Congress who insisted upon accountability for the people who would dare wage war against the Congress of the United States and against the Union and the people that were all elected to serve and to represent. Justice Kavanaugh, of course, was not ruling in the case that my good friend cited before. He was just opining. There was no ruling there, so that was one justice's opinion. My friend cuts me to the quick when he says, we don't care about the separation of powers. I think I'm going to have to turn that insult around and say they don't care about the separation of powers because the executive privilege of the Supreme Court has repeatedly held, going all the way back to 1953 in a case called United States versus Reynolds, that the executive privilege may be invoked only by the President of the United States. And this President of the United States, who represents the Article II branch, has said he's not invoking it on behalf of Scavino or Navarro. He's rejected it. The funny part is that the former president they talk about hasn't even shown up to try to invoke it. And what they're talking about doing could never be the subject of executive privilege anyway, because it's political activity, which is a crime under the Hatch Act, and it's criminal activity. It's a crime to engage in insurrection and coup. How could executive privilege, even if you had a president who wanted nothing more than to try to drape the activities of Scavino and Navarro in executive privilege, how could that president ever prove that it applied when Navarro's job, for example, was the trade advisor? This has nothing to do with trade. He was engaged in trying to overthrow a presidential election, as Judge Carter said last week. Mr. Speaker, this is a matter of the utmost solemnity and seriousness to the American people. We're talking about the survival of American democratic government. For most of human history, people have lived under people like Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump, the kings and the queens and the dictators and the tyrants and the bullies that some people would want to flatter. But we got something else going on in here in America. We've got a project in democratic self-government. Lincoln knew how tenuous it was. He asked whether government of the people, by the people, and for the people shall last or shall perish from the earth. That's the question facing us too. So let's deal with all the issues and controversies we want, but couldn't we get together and all stand up for the institutions of the country? We're doing that in our committee, which is bipartisan. I fear that sometimes we're moving into a Democratic-Republican caucus in Congress and a Trump caucus. There are those of us, like Ms. Cheney, like Mr. Kinzinger, like Mr. Thompson, on the committee who want to work together to get to the bottom of this and then to deal with the problems of the country. And there are those, like the minority leader, who will follow the will of Donald Trump if he says he doesn't want any investigation at all. And I'm sorry, Mr. Speaker, but that's where we are today. These two witnesses have acted with contempt towards Congress and the American people. We must hold them in contempt of Congress and the American people. I yield back. I yield back the balance of my time, and I move the previous question on the resolution.
The gentleman yields back. The question now is on ordering the previous question on the resolution. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized.
On that, I'd request the ayes and nays.
Pursuant to Section 3S of the House Resolution 8, the ayes and nays are ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device.